You're being edited right now. Not your photos, your thoughts, your desires, the shape of who you're becoming. And the strangest part, you asked for it. You signed up. You keep coming back. Today, we're talking about the most intimate invasion in human history, the algorithm that knows you better than you know yourself, and what it's quietly taking from you in return. Let me tell you about a mirror I used to own. Ordinary, honest, indifferent. It showed me exactly what was there. Now imagine a different mirror. This one learns. Every morning, it studies which version of your reflection, thinner, angrier, more successful, makes you stare longest. Whatever keeps your attention, that's what it shows you more of. At first, the shifts are subtle. It changes you so slowly, feeding you the reflection you unconsciously crave. After months, you look in that mirror and feel certain, this is who I really am. These are my beliefs. But the truth is, that reflection was sculpted, engineered, optimized. You're living with that mirror right now. It's in your pocket. Think back to 2010. Remember who you were, the music, the ideas, the focus of your attention. Some shifts are natural, but some were designed. Every scroll is a vote for who you're becoming. Every pause is data. You are teaching an intelligence what version of you to reinforce. The algorithm isn't showing you the world, it's showing you a world. One precisely calculated to keep you engaged, which means activated, emotional, and returning constantly. The ancient Greeks asked about eudaimonia, human flourishing. They asked, is this making me more fully human or less? Your phone doesn't ask that. It only asks, did they stay? Did they click? Here's the terrifying part. In the 1950s, B.F. Skinner studied operant conditioning on pigeons. Reward at random intervals creates addictive, compulsive behavior. We thought, we're not pigeons. 70 years later, we built the Skinner box for humans. We made it beautiful, put it in everyone's hands, and called it connection. The average person touches their phone 2,600 times a day. That's compulsion. No single villain plotted this. Just engineers optimizing for engagement, platforms optimizing for growth. Each optimization is rational, but together, they nudge us further from something essential we feel ourselves losing. You know that feeling? Putting your phone down after an hour and not remembering what you looked at. That sense of time stolen, attention hijacked. You were seeking meaning and got dopamine, seeking truth and got confirmation. The algorithm learned a brutal truth about us. We're not rational. We're emotional, tribal, and reactive. We say we want truth, but we engage with outrage. The machine simply gives us more of what we respond to. There's the old thought experiment. Would you take a pill that made you feel loved and fulfilled if you were actually in a tank hallucinating? Most people say no. We demand real experience. But we already took the pill. We're already in the tank. The algorithm is the dream machine, and we're choosing the comfortable hallucination over complicated reality. Reality is hard. It doesn't validate us every 30 seconds. The feed does. We are the first humans in history to have our consciousness curated by something that isn't human, something that doesn't love us. It just wants us to stay, and we are staying 3, 4, 5 hours a day. While life, real, textured, irreplaceable life, happens somewhere outside the glow of the screen. When was the last time you were truly bored? Not waiting, but deeply, restlessly bored. That empty space where you are just there, with yourself, with silence. Can't remember. Most of us can't. Boredom is where creativity lives, where reflection happens. Thinkers like Dostoevsky and Darwin needed that empty space. We've murdered boredom, executed it in every waiting room, every commute, every quiet moment. We filled the gaps with feed, feed, feed. Now we feel hollow, anxious, and can't recall yesterday's content. We're not processing anymore. We're consuming. This is the deeper loss. We're losing the ability to sit with discomfort, to hold tension, to think through multiple angles instead of reacting instantly. Every challenging idea, every uncomfortable truth, we scroll past it instantly, finding content that confirms we were right all along. The algorithm noticed you don't like being wrong, so it stopped showing you anything that suggests you might be. You're not growing anymore. You're calcifying. Robin Dunbar proposed we can only maintain about 150 meaningful relationships. Your brain can't handle more. But your social media has thousands of friends. You maintain the illusion of connection while experiencing the reality of isolation. You're not building relationships. You're managing an audience. The resulting performance anxiety, the constant curation of your life for invisible judges, is not living. It's marketing yourself. You've become a brand. Your memories exist primarily as proof you had them, documented, filtered, posted, validated. Did it even happen if nobody saw? We've outsourced our sense of self-worth to metrics, likes, shares, views. The algorithm turned your identity into data and your value into engagement. We accepted it because it gave us the one thing we're desperate for: proof that we matter. But here's the trap. The more you perform for validation, the less you know who you are without it. The algorithm doesn't reveal you, it constructs you. And the version it builds isn't designed for your flourishing. It's designed for your engagement. There's a beautiful Japanese word, ma. It means negative space, the pause between notes, the silence between words. Ma isn't absence, it's presence. It's where meaning lives. We've lost ma. Life is now content without pause, stimulus without reflection. We're drowning in information and starving for wisdom. And the tragedy? We are complicit. Nobody forced this on us. We choose it every day. Every time we reach for the phone. Every time we fill the silence instead of sitting in it. The algorithm can only work if we let it, and we keep letting it. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Part of us wants this. Wants the distraction. Wants the numbing. Wants the curated reality where we never have to face uncertainty or the terrifying freedom of our own unmediated thoughts. It's easier to be angry at strangers online than to examine our own anger. Easier to curate our image than to question who we are. Easier to consume than to create. The algorithm didn't steal your attention. You gave it away. And you keep giving it away because the alternative, being fully present in your own life, with all its boredom and difficulty, that's harder. That requires something we've forgotten how to do, being human without an interface. So what now? Delete everything? Retreat to a cabin? Reject technology entirely? No, that's not the answer. The answer is simpler and harder. Wake up. Notice when you reach for the phone. Ask why. Create friction between impulse and action. Reclaim boredom. Seek discomfort. Talk to people whose ideas challenge yours. Build something with your hands. Take walks without podcasts. Let your mind wander. Be wrong about things. Sit with uncertainty. Stop performing your life and start living it. The algorithm is powerful, but it's not inevitable. You're not code. You're not data. You're human. Messy, complicated, gloriously unpredictable. Remember that and reclaim it. What if the loudest voice in your life was your own? And what if it never shut up? Right now, somewhere in your skull, There's a commentator narrating your existence in real time, questioning every move, replaying every mistake, rehearsing disasters that'll never happen. You didn't ask for this. You can't fire them. Welcome to Overthinking, where your brain becomes a prison guard and you're both the prisoner and the architect of your own cell. Let's start absurdly simple, ordering coffee. Most people do this in seconds. You? It's an existential crisis with foam on top. Do I get my usual? What if I'm missing something better? What if the barista judges me? What if I mispronounce macchiato and everyone behind me witnesses my linguistic execution? There's this old paradox, Buridan's ass. A donkey stands between two identical bales of hay, can't choose, starves to death. That's us, except we're drowning in 1,000 bales, each one whispering promises and threats. We're not free, we're paralyzed by freedom itself. Every choice feels apocalyptic, like choosing oat milk over almond might somehow derail our entire trajectory. Then you send a text, hit send, immediate autopsy. Why did I phrase it that way? Did the period sound angry? Should I have used an exclamation point? Too enthusiastic? Not enough. The message is already gone, already read, but your mind insists on rewriting it 17 ways. You replay conversations like a detective obsessing over crime footage, building conspiracy theories from punctuation. They took 3 hours to respond. Why? Busy, angry, dead. You construct entire narratives from silence, building anxiety castles from sand grains. Social interactions become archaeological sites. After every conversation, you excavate each word, pause, micro-expression. Did they laugh genuinely or politely? When they said interesting, did they mean fascinating or please stop talking? You dissect tone, analyze body language, study the spaces between words like they're ancient texts. Here's the cruelty. You're so focused on analyzing, you miss the actual experience. Present but absent. There but not there. Hyper-aware yet completely disconnected. And the imposter syndrome whisper. This one's insidious. You accomplish something. Project completed, compliment received, goal crushed. Within seconds, they don't mean it. They're just being nice. They don't know the real you. You got lucky. Eventually, they'll discover you're a fraud. Success becomes evidence, not of competence, but of successful deception. Every achievement is a ticking bomb, bringing you closer to the moment everyone realizes you're a fake. You don't celebrate victories. You audit them, searching for flaws in the win itself. This is the daily maze, constructed entirely from your own thoughts. Every turn leads to another question, another doubt, another exhausting analysis. The maddening part, you know you're doing it. You're aware of the absurdity, but can't stop. The mind that questions everything questions its own questioning, creating infinite loops of meta-anxiety. Welcome to the paradox of self-awareness. Knowing you're trapped doesn't set you free. Beneath decision fatigue lies something deeper, the compulsion to fortune tell. You don't just think about now. You colonize the future with elaborate catastrophe simulations. Going to a party, you've already mentally scripted 47 conversations, including awkward silences, potential disasters. The mortifying moment you call someone the wrong name. Taking a flight, you've rehearsed emergency landings, missed connections, lost luggage, sitting next to someone who talks the entire time. The ancient Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, visualizing worst-case scenarios to build resilience. They imagined loss to appreciate presence. But we've weaponized this wisdom, transforming a peace tool into a torture instrument. We visualize catastrophe, not to accept it, but to prevent it, control it. Prepare for every possible permutation of reality. Here's what the Stoics knew that we forgot. preparation has limits. No amount of mental rehearsal makes an uncontrollable universe controllable. We're not building resilience. We're building anxiety fortresses that collapse the moment real life arrives with its beautiful, terrifying unpredictability. Then there's the mind reading, the exhausting work of interpreting every subtle cue. Someone crosses their arms during your presentation. Your mind screams. They hate it. They're closed off. They're judging you. Never mind, they might be cold or tired or just comfortable that way. You've become a detective of micro-expressions, a forensic analyst of tone shifts, a scholar of the unsaid. Every interaction becomes a puzzle where you're desperately reading between lines that might not exist. You personalize everything. Friend cancels plans. They find you boring. Boss seems distracted. You disappointed them. Stranger doesn't smile back. You offended them without speaking. The burden of thinking you see too much is carrying everyone's imagined judgments. You're not just living your life. You're living in a hall of mirrors, surrounded by distorted reflections of how you think others perceive you. And the quiet moments that aren't quiet, these might be cruelest. You walk through a park hoping for peace. Trees are beautiful, air is fresh. The world offers stillness, but your mind fills the silence. Did I send that email? Why was Sarah weird yesterday? What if I'm wasting time? Shouldn't I be productive? Why can't I enjoy this? What's wrong with me? Physical silence becomes an invitation for mental chaos. You lie in bed exhausted, desperate for sleep, and your brain replays every embarrassing thing you've ever said, worries about tomorrow, questions your entire existence. Rest becomes impossible, because stillness feels like a vacuum that must be filled. The tragedy. We're so busy thinking about life we forget to live it, so focused on analyzing the moment that it passes by, unexperienced, unlived, observed, but never felt. Here's what goes unsaid. This mental churn has unexpected gifts. The mind that tortures you is capable of extraordinary empathy. You notice when someone's struggling before they speak. You sense unspoken tension. You've trained yourself to consider every angle, so you feel deeply, understand complexity, hold space for nuance in a world demanding simplicity. Your overthinking makes you a natural problem solver and innovator. The same engine keeping you up at night generates creative breakthroughs others miss. So how do we find peace? Not by stopping thoughts, that's like stopping the ocean, but by changing our relationship with them. Observe without judgment. Thoughts are clouds passing through sky. You're not the clouds, you're the sky. Set boundaries. Name the traps. This is catastrophizing. This is mind reading. Simply naming them diminishes their power. Ultimately, embrace the journey. Your overthinking isn't a flaw to fix. You're not broken. You're beautifully, exhaustingly human. The peace you seek isn't in a quiet mind. It's in accepting the loud one and choosing your actions anyway.
There's a point where freedom doesn't die with a bang. It dies with paperwork, with signatures, with people nodding along because, well, it's just one law, right? The Handmaid's Tale isn't about some distant nightmare. It's about Tuesday turning into tyranny before you've finished your coffee. And the truly terrifying bit? We've seen this before. Let's talk about how civilizations commit suicide, not with wars or plagues, but with a slow, methodical dismantling of everything that made them bearable in the first place. Atwood didn't invent Gilead out of thin air. She stitched it together from the ugly bits of human history we'd rather forget. Puritanical America, where they drowned women for reading. Stalin's Soviet Union, where neighbors reported neighbors, the Iranian Revolution of 1979, where rights evaporated overnight. All real, all terrifyingly mundane in their execution. Here's how it starts: a crisis, real or manufactured. Doesn't matter. In Gilead, it's a fertility collapse. Suddenly, there's a problem that needs solving, and when people are scared, properly scared, they will trade freedom for the promise of safety faster than you can say temporary measure. First, they freeze women's bank accounts, just a precaution, they say. Then they remove them from the workforce for protection, naturally. Each step small enough to swallow, each one setting the stage for the next. It's the salami slicing method of oppression. Thin enough that you don't notice you're being consumed until there's nothing left. The real genius of Gilead's rise, and this is where it gets uncomfortably familiar, is how they use language as a weapon. They don't call it slavery, they call it service. They don't call it rape, they call it the ceremony. Orwell knew the game well. Control the words and you control the thoughts. The handmaids aren't stolen, they're reassigned. Children aren't kidnapped, they're rehomed to proper families. Every atrocity gets a euphemism, every horror a holy justification. And then there's religion, the twisted beauty of weaponized faith. Gilead takes cherry-picked Bible verses and constructs an entire architecture of control. Be fruitful and multiply becomes a death sentence for bodily autonomy. The story of Rachel and her handmaid Bilhah becomes state policy. It's not new, this perversion of the sacred. The Crusades did it. The Inquisition did it. Every authoritarian regime finds a book to stand on while crushing people beneath it. But here's the bit that should truly terrify you. It works because enough people chose comfort over courage. The Marthas, the econo people, the wives, they're not all believers. Many know it's wrong, but they have food, shelter, a role. They have survival, and survival, it turns out, is a powerful anesthetic for conscience. Hannah Arendt called it the banality of evil, this ordinary willingness to participate in extraordinary horror. The bureaucrats who processed the paperwork, the guards who just followed orders, the citizens who simply looked away. Gilead didn't need everyone to be a zealot, it just needed most people to be quiet. And history, our actual factual history, shows us how devastatingly easy that is to achieve. Let's crawl inside Offred's head for a moment, because this is where the real horror lives. Not in the public executions or the color-coded uniforms, but in the slow erosion of self. Imagine waking up one day and your name isn't you anymore. You are not June, you're Offred. Offred. A possession, a function. Your past isn't forbidden. It's worse than that. It's treated as if it never existed at all. The psychological warfare Gilead employs is masterclass level cruelty. They don't just imprison bodies, they colonize minds, the aunts, those informers of feminine subjugation, use a twisted maternal authority to break women down and rebuild them as compliant vessels, electric cattle prods wrapped in biblical verses. It's Pavlovian conditioning meets theological justification, and the result is a kind of induced dissociation where you watch yourself participate in your own oppression. Offred's story is devastatingly human. She's neither perfect rebel nor broken victim, but a true survivor. She recites prayers she doesn't believe, plays Scrabble with the commander like letters are life rafts, and steals moments with Nick, reclaiming slivers of desire in a system designed to erase it. These tiny acts aren't grand resistance, they're reminders that being human is itself revolutionary in Gilead. This surveillance state doesn't just watch, it makes you watch yourself. The eyes could be anyone. your walking partner, the guardian at the checkpoint, the Martha preparing you dinner. Paranoia becomes a survival skill, trust becomes suicide, and in that atmosphere, the mind does something terrible. It begins to police itself. You don't need a guard in every room when you've internalized the guard. Foucault called it the panopticon effect, the prison where you become your own jailer. And then there are the others: Moira, who rebels openly and pays the price; Janine, whose mind fractures under the pressure; Serena Joy, who helped build the cage and now finds herself trapped inside it. Each response to trauma is different, its strategy for survival unique. Some resist, some comply, some simply break. There is no moral hierarchy here, just the messy, complicated reality of humans trying to endure the unendurable. The intergenerational trauma is perhaps the most insidious part. Children raised in Gilead won't remember the before times. They will think this is normal. They will believe women who can read are dangerous. They will internalize the hierarchy as natural order. It only takes one generation, sometimes less, for atrocity to become tradition. The daughters of Gilead won't need to be coerced. They'll enforce it themselves, believing they're righteous. That's how totalitarianism achieves immortality, not through force, but through forgetting. And if you're sitting there thinking this is all fiction, all safely contained between the covers of a book, let me introduce you to 2026. Surveillance capitalism tracks your every click. Reproductive rights are legislative battlegrounds. Deepfakes and AI-generated propaganda make truth negotiable. We carry tracking devices voluntarily, surrender our biometric data for convenience, allow algorithms to curate our reality. The tools of Gilead exist. We have just painted them in cheerful corporate colors and called them progress. Atwood wrote Gilead as a warning, not a prophecy, but warnings only work if someone's listening. The signs are always there: the casual erosion of rights, the normalization of surveillance, the creeping rhetoric that dehumanizes the other. Our job is noticing, questioning, refusing to be comfortable when comfort requires someone else's suffering. Gilead happened because good people decided their discomfort wasn't worth the risk of speaking up. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And right now, we're in the rhyming part. So, pay attention. Stay awake. Choose courage.
Picture this: a woman walks down a cobblestone street and the entire world stops breathing, not to admire her humanity but to consume her image. In 1940s Sicily, Malèna Scordia became a prisoner of other people's eyes. This isn't a love story, it's about what happens when beauty becomes your only crime and everyone's a judge. Here's something that will keep you up at night. You are not just a person walking through the world. You are also a character in everyone else's private film, and you didn't audition for the role. Giuseppe Tornatore's Malèna understood this viscerally. The film opens with 12-year-old Renato watching Malèna walk through his Sicilian town, and the camera, our surrogate eye, drinks her in like she's made of light. Slow pans up her legs, lingering on curves. The town square becomes a theater where she's the only actor who doesn't know she's performing. This is the male gaze in its purest form. Film theorist Laura Mulvey coined the term in 1975, describing how cinema positions women as objects to be looked at while men do the looking. But Malèna does something crueler. It makes us complicit. We watch through Renato's adolescent desire, through the jealous wife's hatred, through the leering man's fantasies. The camera never asks what she's thinking. It doesn't care. There's a scene where Malèna simply walks to buy groceries. That's it, but the cinematography transforms her routine errand into a runway of judgment. Every head turns, every conversation stops. The woman clutches their husbands tighter. The man mentally undress her. And Malèna? She's just trying to buy bread. What's devastating is how quickly beauty becomes burden. Her husband's away at war, she is alone, and because she is stunning, the town decides she must be immoral, projection masquerading as truth. They gossip that she is sleeping around, they price gouge her in shops, they make her unemployment and isolation feel like cosmic justice for the crime of existing in a body they simultaneously desire and despise. The film forces us to witness how objectification strips personhood away, layer by layer. Malèna stops being a widow grieving her husband. She stops being a daughter caring for her aging father. She becomes a symbol, a walking Rorschach test for everyone's sexual frustrations and moral insecurities. The townspeople don't see her. They see their own fantasies and fears wearing her face. And here's the thing that makes my stomach turn. This isn't unique to 1940s Sicily. Swap the setting, update the fashion, and you've got Instagram comment sections, Twitter threads, the way we discuss celebrities, politicians, that person at work. We're all citizens of that Sicilian town, cameras in our pockets, ready to reduce complexity to a single consumable image. When Malèna's father dies and she's left with nothing, no money, no support, no options, the film shows us the logical endpoint of collective objectification. Survival becomes degradation. She does what the town always accused her of, not because she wanted to, but because they made it her only path forward. They wrote her story before she could even write her own. There's a particular kind of violence in being seen but not known. It's death by 1,000 glances. The women of the town are especially vicious to Malèna, and that's not accident. They've internalized the male gaze so completely that they police each other, measuring their worth against an impossible standard that Malèna embodies. She's beautiful, so she must be punished. She's desired, so she must be dangerous. The patriarchy doesn't need enforcers when it can convince people to surveil themselves and each other. When the war ends and Malèna returns to town, beaten and broken, something shifts. The woman who once spat at her now cut her hair in the square. Literal physical violence as the culmination of years of visual violence. They're punishing her for making them feel inadequate, for being the screen onto which men projected their desire instead of them. But here's the paradox. They never saw her either. They saw only what she made them feel about themselves. Renato, our narrator, grows up by the film's end. He helps her, but even his love was built on years of voyeuristic fantasy. Can you truly help someone you've only ever objectified? Can redemption erase complicity? Modern life has weaponized the gaze. Every social media platform is a town square where we perform, judge, consume. We have democratized objectification. Now everyone can be both surveilled and surveiller. We scroll through strangers' faces, making split-second judgments. Attractive? Unattractive. Worthy? Unworthy. We have become merchants of visibility, trading in likes and shares, measuring human value in metrics. And the standards? Impossibly narrow. Photoshopped, filtered, we have created a world where everyone's a Malèna, walking through hostile streets, aware that thousands of eyes are performing invisible calculations about their worth based solely on surfaces. The mental health crisis among young people, especially young women, isn't coincidental. When your existence is primarily as an image to be consumed, anxiety becomes rational, body dysmorphia becomes predictable, the self fragments into the version you are and the version you are perceived to be, and the gap between them grows cavernous. But here's what Malèna whispers between its frames. We can choose differently. We can look with empathy instead of appetite. We can ask questions instead of making assumptions. We can recognize that every person we see is living a story we know nothing about, fighting battles invisible to us, hoping to be understood rather than merely seen. The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas wrote about the face of the other, the idea that truly seeing another person's face is an ethical encounter that demands responsibility. Not their body, not their image, but their face, the seat of their humanity, their vulnerability, their plea to be recognized as a subject, not an object. What if we looked at each other that way? What if every glance was an attempt to see rather than to judge, to understand rather than to consume? Malèna doesn't offer easy answers because there aren't any, but it does offer a challenge. Recognize the camera in your own hand, the gaze you carry into the world. You have the power to objectify or to humanize with every look you give. Maybe next time you catch yourself staring, consuming, judging, pause. Ask what you're not seeing. Remember that behind every image is someone trying to survive their own story, just like you. The male gaze, the objectifying gaze, isn't inevitable. It's learned, which means we can unlearn it, one conscious look at a time.
You know that dream? Falling through the void, running from the unseen, suddenly naked among strangers. You wake up, heart pounding, reality feeling thin. What if I told you those weren't glitches? What if every night, while you sleep, you're having a conversation with the oldest, wisest part of yourself, and you've just forgotten the language to hear it? Here's the thing about dreams that nobody tells you. They're not entertainment. They're not your brain having a little psychedelic party while you're unconscious. They're messages written in a language older than words, delivered by a part of you that existed before you learned to lie to yourself. Every night, you descend into REM sleep, rapid eye movement if you want to be technical about it, and your brain does something extraordinary. It paralyzes your body, probably so you don't act out that bit where you're fighting a dragon made of your childhood anxieties. Then it starts firing neurons in patterns that look almost identical to waking consciousness. Almost. Except the logic center, the bit that says dragons aren't real and you can't breathe underwater, that part goes offline. What you're left with is pure, unfiltered subconscious. The ancient Egyptians thought dreams were messages from the gods. The Greeks built entire temples where people would sleep, hoping to receive divine wisdom. Freud called them the royal road to the unconscious, which is very Freud of him, but he wasn't entirely wrong. Modern neuroscience suggests dreams might be how we process threats, rehearse scenarios, consolidate memories, or work through emotional turbulence we're too busy to deal with during the day. But here's what really matters. Your dreams are yours. That recurring nightmare about showing up to an exam you never studied for, that's not some universal symbol you can look up in a dream dictionary. That's your anxiety wearing a school uniform. The dream where you can fly but only 3 feet off the ground. That's your relationship with freedom and limitation playing out in metaphor. Think about it. You spend roughly a third of your life asleep. If you live to 80, that's about 26 years of dreaming. 26 years of nightly theatre productions starring you, directed by you, written by the part of you that knows everything you've ever tried to forget. Every fear you've buried, every desire you've been too afraid to name, every version of yourself you might have been. The most common dream themes: falling, being chased, teeth falling out, flying, being unprepared. They show up across cultures, across centuries, but they don't mean the same thing for everyone. Falling might mean loss of control for you, but freedom for someone else. Being chased could be avoidance, or it could be the thrill of transformation. Your subconscious speaks in your dialect, uses your references, your memories, your fears. And here's the beautiful, terrifying part. It's trying to help you. Every bizarre scenario, every impossible landscape, every conversation with your dead grandmother, or your future self, or a talking cat. It's all your mind's way of processing what your waking consciousness couldn't handle. It's showing you what you need to see, even if you don't want to look. So how do you learn to speak dream? How do you translate these nocturnal narratives into something useful? Something that doesn't just fade away like smoke the moment you open your eyes. First, you have to remember. Most dreams dissolve within 5 minutes of waking. They're written in invisible ink that only shows up in darkness. The solution? A dream journal. keep it by your bed. The moment you wake up, before you check your phone, before you wonder what day it is, write. Don't worry about complete sentences or making sense. Just capture the fragments, the feeling, the colors, the impossible architecture, the face that was your friend, but also your father, but also a stranger. Do this for a month and patterns will emerge. You'll notice your subconscious has favorite metaphors, recurring locations, persistent characters. You'll start to recognize your own symbolic language. Maybe water always means emotion. Maybe houses represent your sense of self. Every time you dream about your childhood home, you're wrestling with old versions of yourself that you thought you'd left behind. Pay attention to the emotions more than the events. Dreams don't care about literal accuracy. If you dream about being chased by a monster through a mall, the important part isn't the monster or the mall. It's the fear. It's the feeling of being pursued, whatever you're running from in your waking life. And here's something fascinating. The ancient technique of lucid dreaming, becoming conscious within the dream, is making a comeback in neuroscience labs. The mnemonic induction of lucid dreams technique, MCLD, involves setting an intention before sleep. You tell yourself, I will realize I'm dreaming. You visualize recognizing dream signs. If you're patient, you'll be walking through a dream and suddenly think, wait, this is a dream. And then everything changes. Because once you're conscious, you're not just watching the movie, you're directing it. You can turn and face the thing that's chasing you. You can ask the strange figure what it represents. More importantly than flying, you can dialogue with your subconscious in real time. You can literally ask your deepest self what it's trying to tell you. Dreams are evolution's way of giving you a sandbox, a place to practice, a place to process, a place to integrate all the contradictions and complexities of being human without the risk of actual consequences. You can die in a dream and wake up fine. You can confront your worst fears. You can experiment with different versions of yourself. Every night, you're handed a ticket to your own private theater, where the only story being told is yours. The only character that matters is you, in all your forms, all your ages, all your possible futures. Your subconscious isn't trying to confuse you. It's trying to complete you, to show you the parts of yourself you've hidden away. The symbols aren't universal. The interpretations aren't in a book. The answers aren't online. They're in you, waiting for you to learn their language, to pay attention, to take your dreams as seriously as you take your waking thoughts. So tonight, when you close your eyes and drift into that space between consciousness and void, remember, you're not just sleeping. You're descending into the most honest conversation you'll ever have. Your subconscious is waiting, patient as always, ready to show you what you need to see. Keep a journal. Write in the dark if you have to. Chase the fragments before they fade. Learn your own symbolic language. And maybe, just maybe, you'll start to understand the secret messages you've been sending yourself all along. Because the deepest truths aren't found in daylight. They're waiting in dreams, in shadows, in the infinite theater of your sleeping mind. Sweet dreams. You're going to need them.
You ever notice how we've built a world where you can be anything, do anything, watch anything, and yet somehow you're sitting there at 11 p.m. paralyzed by Netflix, feeling like you've chosen nothing and lost everything? Here's the uncomfortable bit. What if freedom isn't what we thought? What if all these choices aren't liberating you? They're burying you alive? So let's talk about restaurants. Imagine you're hungry, proper hungry, and someone hands you a menu with 5 dishes. You scan it, pick the pasta, done. Now imagine they hand you a menu with 300 dishes. Suddenly you are sweating. Is the Thai better than the Italian? What if the experimental fusion section has something life-changing? 20 minutes later, you have ordered nothing. You're exhausted and you've forgotten why you came. That's your life now. That's all our lives. We're swimming in an ocean of infinite options, and we're told this is peak civilization. Every streaming service, every career path, every potential version of yourself waiting in the wings. You could be a podcaster, a coder, a digital nomad in Bali. You could watch Norwegian noir or Nigerian comedy or that one documentary about fonts everyone keeps recommending. The world has cracked itself open like an oyster and said, "Here, have everything." And we're drowning. There's this thing psychologists call choice overload, which is a fancy way of saying your brain wasn't designed for this. Back when we were stumbling across savannas, decisions were simple. Eat the berries or don't. Run from the lion or become lunch. Now you're choosing between 17 types of oat milk while simultaneously wondering if you should quit your job and retrain as a therapist because you watched one video about burnout. Every choice comes with a shadow, the ghost of everything you didn't pick. You choose the Netflix film, but what about the other 400? You take the marketing job, but what about the other 73 careers you could have had? And here's where it gets properly twisted. You start to believe that somewhere in that vast sea of options is the perfect choice, the one that will finally make you feel complete. So you keep searching, you keep scrolling. You never commit. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said we're condemned to be free, which sounded dramatic in 1940s Paris but feels almost quaint now. He meant we're burdened by the weight of our own choices. He had no idea. He didn't live in a world where you could order food from 40 countries at 2 a.m. while comparing 12 different life insurance policies and swiping through infinite potential romantic partners. We're not condemned to be free. We are condemned to be endlessly free, which is somehow worse. And meaning? Meaning requires depth. It requires commitment. It requires saying, this matters, so I'm staying here. But when every door is open, when you can pivot and reinvent yourself every 6 months, nothing feels solid anymore. You're not building a life, you're curating a highlight reel. You're not connecting deeply, you're collecting experiences like they're Pokemon cards. There's a certain loneliness to infinite choice, isn't there? You start to realize that freedom without direction is just chaos wearing a nice suit. Here's what nobody tells you about the paradox. The antidote to overwhelming freedom isn't less freedom, it's intentionality. It's the radical act of closing doors. I know, sounds backwards. We've been conditioned to believe that keeping options open is smart, that commitment is limiting, that saying no is somehow failure. But think about the people you know who actually seem content, who have built something meaningful. They are not the ones perpetually optimizing, endlessly shopping for better versions of themselves. They're the ones who picked something, maybe not the perfect thing, but a good thing, and went deep. There's this concept in economics called satisficing, coined by Harvard Simon, who clearly enjoyed making up words. It means choosing the first option that meets your criteria, rather than exhaustively searching for the optimal one. It's choosing good enough and moving on with your life. And here's the kicker. People who satisfice are generally happier than people who maximize, because maximizers are haunted. They are forever wondering if something better exists just around the corner. You wanna know what freedom actually looks like? It looks like limitations you have chosen for yourself. It's saying, I'm learning the guitar, not the piano, not the violin, just the guitar, and I'm sticking with it even when it's hard. It's watching one show all the way through instead of sampling 20. It's committing to a place, a person, a craft, a path, not because it's perfect, but because depth requires staying put. The writer David Foster Wallace talked about worship, not in a religious sense necessarily, but in the sense that you are always worshipping something. You're always organizing your life around some central concern. The question isn't whether to worship, but what. And when you worship choice itself, when novelty becomes your god, you end up scattered, you end up nowhere. So maybe the real question isn't how do I maximize my options? Maybe it's what do I actually care about? Stripe away the noise, the FOMO, the endless scroll of other people's curated lives. What would you do if you only had 5 options? What matters enough to commit to? Here's a practical bit. Start saying no. Not in a hostile way, but in a protective way. No to the party you don't want to attend. No to the career path that doesn't excite you, even if it sounds impressive. No to the relationship that's just fine but not quite right. Every no clears space for a deeper yes. Set constraints. Sounds counterintuitive, but constraints breed creativity and meaning. Writers who can write about anything often write about nothing. Artists with infinite materials produce scattered work. You need boundaries, you need a frame. And maybe, just maybe, accept that you are going to miss out on things. That's not tragedy, that's life. You can't read every book, visit every country, master every skill. The moment you accept that, the moment you stop trying to live every possible life simultaneously, something shifts. You start living your life. So here we are, at the end of it all, standing in the wreckage of infinite possibility. The paradox isn't going away. The options will keep multiplying. The world will keep offering you everything. But you get to choose what to do with that. You get to build fences around what matters. You get to say this, not that. And in those limitations, in those commitments, you might just find the very thing all those choices promised but never delivered. Meaning. Real, deep, aching meaning. The kind you can't swipe past. So go on then, pick something, anything, and for once, stay. You know that feeling when you're 3 biscuits deep and you reach for the 4th even though you're not hungry anymore? That tiny moment where something in you whispers more and you listen? Now imagine that whisper never stops. Imagine it grows teeth, grows taller than the trees, starts wearing your face. That's the Wendigo, and it's been waiting in the cold dark of human consciousness since before we had words for what we feared most about ourselves. The Algonquian people knew winters that could erase a person. Not just kill them, erase them. Snow swallowed tracks, wind sanded names out of memory. When stored corn ran out, when hunting grounds went silent, when cold chewed through bone and sanity, and you looked at your neighbor and felt something awful austere, that's when the stories begun. Not for entertainment, for survival. The Wendigo wasn't born a monster, it was a person once, someone ordinary, someone hungry, someone who crossed a line who we pretend is solid but is actually terrifyingly thin. The legend says they ate human flesh during famine, and the act transformed them. Their hearts froze, their hunger became infinite, they grew tall and gaunt. Stretched wrong, reeking of frost and decay, eyes like holes punched through the world. The more they consumed, the hungrier they became. Desire severed from need, a perfect punishment. But the Wendigo wasn't just a warning about cannibalism, it was psychological technology, a cultural antibody against the most dangerous instinct humans have. I can take more than my share and it'll be fine. In societies where survival demanded total cooperation, where hoarding could kill everyone, the Wendigo enforced moral gravity. It said greed doesn't just harm others, it mutates you. It turns you into something unrecognizable. This wasn't morality backed by prison or laws. It was enforced by identity. Cross the line and you don't just die. You stop being human. Your name dissolves. Your relationships vanish. You become hunger, wearing a body. No evidence required. The winter was proof enough. Then Carl Jung enters centuries later, never having faced an Algonquian winter, and starts mapping the psyche. He describes the shadow, the parts of ourselves we bury, jealousy, cruelty, envy, hunger, everything that doesn't fit the edited story we tell about who we are. Jung's insight was simple and brutal. What you repress doesn't disappear. It waits. It grows teeth in the dark. The Wendigo is the shadow made flesh. Every denied impulse, every suppressed desire, every more we pretend we don't feel, condensed into one figure. It shows what happens when we refuse to acknowledge our capacity for destruction, when we insist we're above it, when we say, "I'm not like that," while hunger quietly rewrites our priorities. The Wendigo doesn't arrive suddenly. It comes after a long habit of looking away. And here's the most unsettling part. The Wendigo isn't born from evil. It's born from justification. From the moment you decide this time the rules don't apply, that you need matters more, that survival excuses everything. The monster isn't the famine or the cold, it's the reasoning that follows. The Wendigo doesn't happen to you, it happens because of you, because you refuse to look at yourself at exactly the wrong moment. Here's the uncomfortable bit. You probably know a Wendigo. You might work for one. Hell, you might be slowly becoming one and calling it ambition. The scary part isn't that monsters exist. It's that they wear LinkedIn headshots and talk about scalability. Think about late-stage capitalism for a second. This system that demands infinite growth on a finite planet. More profit this quarter than last quarter, forever, regardless of consequence. That's not economics, that's Wendigo logic. The compulsion to consume beyond need, beyond reason, until there's nothing left to eat. Corporate entities that devour communities, ecosystems, and features, always hungry, never satisfied, structurally incapable of saying enough. When a system collapses a forest, poisons a river, and shrugs because the stock went up, you're not watching efficiency, you are watching hunger institutionalized. Or consider addiction, not just to substances, but to anything. Validation, productivity, achievement, control. That voice that says one more drink, one more like, one more hour of work, one more person's approval will finally feel the emptiness. Except it never does. The hunger just recalibrates. The baseline shifts. You need more next time to feel less empty than before. The Wendigo thrives inside dopamine feedback loops, wearing expensive sneakers, optimizing its morning routine, checking its phone at red lights while calling itself disciplined. We're living in a Wendigo culture. We didn't just tolerate the shadow, we put it on a vision board. Hustle harder, maximize your potential, disrupt everything. These aren't neutral slogans, they're incantations. Say them enough times and ordinary humans slowly mutate into creatures of insatiable appetite. Sleep becomes weakness, rest becomes guilt, enough becomes failure. And the cruelest part, we call it success. We reward it, we platform it, we give it TED Talks and best-selling books and pretend it's wisdom. What used to be a warning is now a business model. The myth said if you give yourself over to endless hunger, you stop being human. Modern culture says if you don't, you are falling behind. Same monster, better branding. But Jung had something genuinely useful to say here. He believed the shadow couldn't be killed, only integrated. You don't slay the Wendigo. You recognize that its hunger is your hunger, scaled up to monstrous proportions. You admit that you are capable of consumption, of selfishness, of caring about yourself more than the collective when pressure hits, not to indulge it, not to excuse it, but to see it clearly enough that it doesn't run your life from behind the curtain. Because what you deny controls you. What you name, you can negotiate with. Shadow work isn't about becoming pure or enlightened or morally spotless. That's just ego in a white robe. It's about becoming whole. It's about looking the Wendigo in the eye and saying, yeah, that's in me too. And then, this is the important part, choosing not to let it drive. The Algonquian people had it right all along. The Wendigo isn't just a monster story. It's a mirror held up to the part of us that always wants more, that mistakes hunger for identity, that would devour the world to fill an emptiness that can't be filled by devouring. So maybe the real question isn't whether the Wendigo exists, it's whether you're feeding it, whether you're letting that voice that whispers more make your decisions. The good news? Every time you choose enough over more, every time you integrate instead of deny, every time you feed connection instead of appetite, the Wendigo gets a little smaller, a little more human. And that's how monsters die. Not with silver bullets, but with the quiet decision to stop becoming them.